Hello and welcome to a pre-recorded session of the IEEE International Symposium on Digital Privacy and Social Media being held in San Jose on the 1st of August 2022. My name is Roba Abbas and I am the Technical Committee Chair of the Socio-Technical Systems Committee within the IEEE Society on the Social Implications of Technology. And I'm joined today by the Executive Chair of the Symposium, Professor Katina Michael. I would like to begin by acknowledging the main technical sponsor of our event, the IEEE Consumer Technology Society, for making this symposium possible. The IEEE Consumer Technology Society realized that they required a transdisciplinary approach to address global issues related to the design and development of consumer technologies, and have called for diverse stakeholders to come together to respond to the digital privacy requirements and matters pertaining to social media in particular. I would like to thank for their patronage, our gold patron, the IEEE Digital Privacy Initiative, and our silver patron, the Prototype Company, led by Darren Culbreth. And of course, for their ongoing support, the IEEE Society on the Social Implications of Technology and the IEEE Santa Clara section, and the CT-SOC San Francisco Bay Area chapter. Today we have with us Faheem Hussain. Dr. Faheem Hussain is an interdisciplinary researcher with expertise in information and communication technology, global development, human displacement, and public policy. Faheem is currently working as a clinical associate professor in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society at Arizona State University. He received his Ph.D. in engineering and public policy from Carnegie Mellon University. Faheem's current research projects involve impact and innovation analyses of digital communication platforms, formulation of online education strategies, and the development of an inclusive digital afterlife ecosystem for the Global South. Today, Faheem will present a seminar titled Digital Sovereignty, Changing Governance, and Our Future Identity, Perspectives from Our Deceased Users. And we welcome you, Faheem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rava, and thank you so much, Katina, for giving me the opportunity. We are going to talk about digital identity, changing governance, and our future citizenship, but from the perspective of our deceased users. And this is something very close to our heart, our research related with global justice and equitable digital technology innovation. The goal of this talk today, we are going to focus on the possibilities and challenges of our digital identities. We are going to talk about governance, sovereignty, but from a digital perspective. The idea has been to raise questions about some of the relatively uncharted territories that many of us do not talk much, especially when it comes to the digital realm within the geographically located Global South. Or in addition to this, we're also going to talk about some of the initial findings that my research team has been looking into in the last couple of years. So one of the things, and maybe I'll just ask both of you, I kind of know. Any idea, I just recently knew about it, what is an NPC? If anybody like Katina or Roba?
Well, is it new something? Is it new? Something consumer? Something.
Wrong answer. I have a 9-year-old, an avid gamer. I think it's bad parenting on my part. But NPC means non-playing character. So there are so many non-playing characters. Some of them they are powered with AI and whatnot. But those elements are there when you are engaged in a gaming situation. NPCs are very important. They give you information on something or in different stages. But that's something critical. I'll come back to it. But imagine this: these NPCs ideally are not supposed to have their own agency. And we'll talk about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Now, this is the question that I'm not going to ask you, but imagine this, that how many countries' citizenship do we share between ourselves? I personally, I think I have several. I'm a Bangladeshi national. I live in the USA, but at the same time, I think I'm a citizen of the Republic of Google, Republic of Meta, or Facebook, and so many other things. So the way it happens that when we talk about our identity, when we talk about our citizenry, our own practices, it's beyond our traditional geopolitical reality. And this is the time where in the civilization, I guess, where we are merging or intersecting and transcending between different realms, some digital, some analog, and some in between. So, and if that's the case, then it's a very basic question that all of us are asking, and there have been tons of work on who owns our personal digital data, right? Privacy comes in, security comes in. But then who owns our personal digital data when we are dead? We are, as a biological being, it's a certainty that we are going to be expired, deceased. Then what happens to our digital presence, digital selves? And if we ask the questions, again, it's not for you, it's just us reflecting on it. Have we or have you assigned anyone officially to take care of your digital accounts after your death? And in majority of the things, conversations that I had in different parts of the world, majority of the people, unfortunately, have said, no, they haven't. They haven't thought about it. They didn't care about it. And in many cases, they don't have actually know about some of the pitfalls and ideas and thoughts. So these are the initial questions that started at a personal level around 8 to 9 years ago. But then it kind of grew. And as I started looking into my knowledge enterprise of looking into equitable digital technologies and innovation, then it kind of started bothering me more. It's an uncharted territory. It's unanswered questions, but at the same time, it becomes more challenging when you are also looking into the communities who have been traditionally, unfortunately, underrepresented. So before we go further in that route, so what is a digital afterlife? So when we talk about our daily use of media, we are talking about our footprints in terms of our emails, our footprints in terms of our posts, our likes, our shares, our services, our real estates online. And after the biological death of ours, these digital remnants are there. And it kind of comprises our collective and individual digital afterlife. So if that's the case, why does it matter? Why really what kind of impact it has? When we talk about the deceased, you will see since the dawn of civilization, we as human beings have been fascinated about afterlife in many shapes and sizes. Shapes and sizes, imagine the pyramids, a big, interesting artifact of our fascination as humans with afterlife. Then imagine, I am from the Indian subcontinent, the Taj Mahal. Again, afterlife. And it's kind of fascination, and the Muslims were there to remember somebody, to make sure something is there, even though the biological beings are not there. So those things are there, right? And there are different religious interpretations. So that's also something very fascinating. When we talk about digital innovations, when we talk about norms, transcending ideas, we do not, in many cases, unfortunately, talk about different religious interpretations and ideas and thoughts and frameworks and benchmarks about those things. So with all those things in mind, what is the privacy for the deceased? What kind of privacy we're going to talk about once the user is not there anymore biologically? And why should we care? Or who should be caring? And when we talk about value of data, we talk about security, we talk about legal implications. Imagine this identity of ours. And this is where things get very interesting, very tricky, very scary, and very fascinating for us researchers. What is identity of us? Or is it us at all when we talk about the humanoid presence online, where that presence or data points or hub is collecting so many points of our own lives, interactions and interpretations, interactions and interpretations. And what kind of stops them, if at all, from collating different kind of interpretations and interactions of different beings and lump it together? So is it possible? Of course it is possible. And then what kind of social implications, political implications, religious implications, and a low-hanging fruit, technical implications that can have. So these are the things that needs to be answered, needs to be questioned, and needs to be standardized to see. I don't know how to do that. When we talk about social media, disruptive socio-technical system, that's how we would like to see it. There are challenges, of course, there are conversations, there are design flaws, and there are ongoing conversations on this. I work with Displacement a lot. We have seen in the last several years how different social media networks kind of fall short and then started correcting themselves when it comes to acting on different humanitarian disasters, man-made disasters and atrocities. But still, there are so many problems. But while doing this, what we have seen, again, is this emergence, not just emergence, and to some extent, the prevalence and growth of this new world order, where beyond the nation states, imagine the question of citizenship that I had before, and these nation states and these new republics that's very emerging. We are talking about the problems and challenges with introduction of information autocracy. We are talking also about the possibilities of the absence of citizens or netizens' participation in this whole process. Because in many cases, we have seen that these transnational, international digital services are saying that, hey, we are actually including the governments, different geopolitical governments, to be a part of the conversations. We are engaging with them. That's good, better than nothing. But what if, and in many cases, which is the case, that the actual citizens, the actual people are absent from the governance of their own traditional countries? Then where are they? Where are their voices in these kind of dialogues, in this kind of participation? Where are we? And beyond that, if we push it further, it becomes a justice issue. Because when we talk about inclusion, when we talk about equity, is it something that, imagine the level of tremendous push we have? Oh, we want to develop people, develop different communities, and digitization can help. Of course, inclusive digitization can help. But while we are pushing for this, it's a tremendously top-down approach. It's as if we have the solution we're looking for problems, but it's not inclusive when we are talking about designing the solutions. Now, imagine the value of data and the value of data when beyond the expiration of our biological life. In that conversation, none of the Global South communities are actually involved. So some of the older statistics that we have, according to Oxford Internet Institute, if we look into one of the most popular social media network right now, Facebook, we are looking into a minimum of 1.4 billion users pass away by 2100. And that number exponentially can grow. In most cases, what really bothers me beyond the numbers is majority of these deceased profiles belong to the non-Western society people. Now, if that's the case, where are the roots? Where are the conversations? Where are the inclusion? So that comes in. Death in the digital era. I had the amazing opportunity of living and working in the Republic of Korea for some time. And it has been I was amazed to see the level of digital development they have in that society. And when this thing happens, like this is one of those VR-based companies who had inputs from a deceased girl's life to create her in the virtual reality. And it has been legally shared by her mother. The whole idea was that the bereaved mother is going to talk to her deceased daughter, have a closure, have an under. So we are talking about imagine. We are transcending, we're looking into our afterlife, we're looking into interacting with our deceased, we're looking into managing our grief. We are actually exploring some of the things that in many cases, the people we have lost, and we wish we had the time and the chance to talk with them, interact with them. Now it's a reality. But that's one of the things that is a positive thing in many cases. But what are the implications about the grief management if it goes haywire? What happens? Who actually has the responsibility or who can be actually held responsible with some negative implications out of such experiments or applications? What happens if I recreate some of the most notorious characters in human history in this VR, and then let them, spill out all the evil things they have been talking or doing before, as if this network of disinformation, misinformation, and all these conspiracy theories were not bad enough. Now, some of those, awful characters can come into being. So if that's the case, then how are we ready to actually manage these things? So that's one of those, high-end ones. Now imagine a global south example. So this is one of the photographers I used to follow in Flickr. He is from Bangladesh, and he had around 12,000 photos last time I checked in his Facebook page, and he had some other presence as well in Insta and whatnot. He died unexpectedly. He was pretty young. But then what we have seen that all his clients' images have been made public. And in many cases, they have been used and reused, monetized without, of course, he's not there anymore, his family's consent and whatnot. And they didn't have watermarks, they didn't have copyrights. And when we talked, because he's a Bangladeshi citizen, when we talked to some of the concerned authorities there, they had nothing to do because there's no rules or regulations to protect or to address these kind of deceased user things. Now, imagine this. We talked about some of the possibilities of futuristic but uncharted territories of digital applications. We kind of covered on some of the implications of unattended digital assets. Beyond that, in the last 2 years or plus, during the global pandemic, we have seen this huge emergence of mourning services, digital mourning services all over the world. And it kind of cut across different societies. We have seen the emergence of social networks where AI have been used for virtual being that publishes comments and interacts with you on your behalf intelligently. Then you have this virtual self that learns from each action the user takes, and create a virtual self with some unique activities as if they are alive. So those things are there, and they are being kind of used for mourning services as well. And then you have this kind of OneRoom and other services. There are so many of them. In China, they have this virtual grave swiping things. Japan has been using QR in the tombstones forever. But these things emerged so much, and it created a lot of very interesting implications. There are streaming from the graveyard, there is streaming from the live burial sites. But at the same time, my research team, we have been talking to different religious leaders and scholars about it. And in many cases, they are very much confused about the benchmarks or the notions or the limitations or the interpretations of the digital medias and the services while they are being converged with some of the religious practices for the mourning and for the deceased. And they are kind of also confused and a bit, would love to be a part of the conversation in terms of such innovations. Now, when it comes to the laws of the lands, which has been very interesting, is that within the USA, there had been laws, interestingly, initially, which was pro-citizens, but then No surprise to us, it became pro-industry. Nothing wrong with this, but interestingly, by default, if we do not do much about it, all our digital data, our digital artifacts actually go back to our digital service providers who do not have much to say about it. But the other side of the pond, from where I am right now in the EU, it's very interesting. It's kind of dated, but it kind of shows you the summary that I have, that the European Union, the different countries within, they are very much proactive and kind of started recognizing the deceased rights and about their personal data. But imagine this, we are talking about the USA, we are talking about European Union, we are not talking about even the bigger countries with a majority of our digital users that belongs to, Sub-Saharan Africa, that belongs to Asia, and that belongs to South America. It's totally absent. No guidelines, no frameworks, benchmarks we are looking into. It's overwhelming majority of these deceased users' accounts are unreported. So when we talk about our digital citizenship and citizenry, our presence, ongoing presence, these unique ideas and identities that we are working on, or we are being part of, it's kind of absent when it comes to our sense of belonging, our sense of conversations. In most cases, we see that there's a huge indifference, even from the global digital service providers, to actually make people aware about the possible services that they have, which is very disturbing. The terms of service, these online versions in different languages which are not available when it comes to, the memorial services and whatnot that has been available there, what we have seen. And more importantly, because I work in the realm of technology policy, especially in the global south, majority of the governments that I have worked on with and was talked with about totally blindsided about this whole value of data and the digital afterlife and these digital sovereignty issues. So this global push, as I mentioned before, about this rapid digitization is making things actually complicated fast. So with those things in mind, the questions are, who can be a citizen in such a connected world that transcends jurisdiction of digital services? What are we doing about it? So from the School of Future of Innovation in Society, as my friend here, Katina, and I always talk about it, the future is ours. But who is us? And what are the futures? And who defines it? And who governs our identities? How pervasive is or will be the role of these global digital services in our present and future governance? And more importantly, where is my voice or presence? Or I will become an NPC. So that's where I think I should stop. And these are the questions, and the whole idea is not to just raise questions, but to engage both at the intellectual level, but more importantly at the community level in different parts, and keep talking about it, coming together and have answers and do a lot of research. So yeah, that's where we are.
So what an incredible presentation you've given us, Faheem. A lot of food for thought there. And the thing I guess all humans have in common is that everyone will die, given current state of technology. So it's of concern to every single human being alive on the planet, and perhaps even those other living things like animals that somehow and sometimes also have websites dedicated to them and are memorialized in many different ways. I wanted to ask you, because, this is a very important issue to do with the retention of data, a traditional topic, but when you look at it in what happens after we die, it becomes a heightened issue. Do you think the problem at the moment with the service provider offerings is that they don't have an alternate model by which they can request payment? So if you're dead, you actually can't access your bank account, and therefore the paying customer motif disappears. And so service providers are not interested with the dead because they're not paying customers. Do you think there's some merit in that statement? And what other ways could we change that? Perhaps that there is a potential digital afterlife where there is archiving, for example.
Actually, we are still going to produce money for digital service providers even after we are dead. And it's actually in the service provider's own interest to keep us alive online. We have seen that. There's nothing as free lunch, right? So it's there. And the different services that we have seen with, especially say, we are going to talk more about Meta or Facebook because it's the dominant social network yet. In terms of the emergence and evolution of some sort of digital afterlife provisions, management or deceased users management, Facebook has done some stuff with many researchers are there involved. While saying that, what I would say is it's in their own interest, and they do that. They have this memorization pages, and they would love us to go share, do those, because those are the hubs of connections and network. The problem that I see is monetizations can be done even with inclusions and giving some sort of transparency and transferability of agency control to the deceased. It's definitely it's something that we haven't seen before. But again, this is something that we haven't seen before. It's not something new. That's the technological evolution. Of course, there will be new challenges. What really appalls me is that silence in terms of engagement from let's just first blame on us as academics, as researchers, as citizen activists. We haven't seen that kind of even any kind of noises to raise those issues because that's important and then from the service provider's point of view, it's also very important that right now everybody has, if they're thinking about it, they have their own standards, and that's pretty much it. There's no global standards. Imagine that I was talking about this global, I keep talking about this global thing, because this is not something that should be controlled and decided by somebody in California. Let's just put it this way. This is because it's a new world order. I would love to have my presence from Nairobi. I would love to have my presence from Australia, from anywhere, from Peru, from Dhaka. So that's the thing. That's something that I think, I think that kind of conversation needs to be there. And of course, people are there to make money. That's fine. But it should be done in a bit more transparent and inclusive way.
So I like the reflection that data once collected is making continual money for service providers. Perhaps I was poking at new service revenue streams. For example, if I have a website and I've spent, 15, 20 years working on that website, is it just going to be switched off once I pass away and the subscription ends because there is no paying credit card? And the answer is yes, it's switched off in that way. And we have found other means, the Wayback Machine, for example, on archive.org to try and memorialize the web pages that ever existed on the internet. But interestingly, you ask a lawyer, when you go to do your will, this is what I would like to happen with my digital assets, and their responses vary. Can you tell us about what kinds of responses a lawyer, for example, may give to somebody who's enacting their will and how it might work to retain your digital assets?
This is where the interesting realm of jurisdiction comes in. Who owns what and where? Is it some of the the data centers somewhere up north, or somewhere in the west coast of the USA, or somewhere in China, or somewhere in India? So this jurisdiction, because we have worked on our fiduciary, our resources after our death and inheritances, of our physical things. When it comes to the digital thing, it's very confusing because of the jurisdiction stuff. Now, and that's where things are. I keep talking about the clash of the republics or the new republics, because in many cases, the law of the land, this land concept becomes so confusing and transcending that we don't know. Because right now, the provisions are, because different global service providers have different standards. And in many cases, they are actually kind of answerable to the laws of where they are, initially being established and recognized, not in other countries. So, and we haven't seen, because in many cases they can just, the rules and the provisions that they have, according to our terms of services, we agreed to those things. And so I really do not see someone from Nepal, if they want to use their own court to actually have safeguard all the digital citizens' data. That hasn't been done. It's not possible right now. Our rules and our regulations and our legal structure is not capable at this point of doing this.
It's interesting. I've spoken to some lawyers who have encouraged their clients not to bridge passwords and social media accounts onto or embedded into the will. They've asked them to create a separate piece of paper that is standalone, and for direction to which individual receives and inherits that piece of paper, which would, you can imagine the war in a family potentially, or the things that might be uncovered posthumous, which is pretty frightening to think about in some situations, in some family contexts. In terms of copyright now, let's say we want to use the metaverse to do what you showed us with respect to ensuring the creation of digital assets of those whom we love, in order to bring them back when we need them in a digital form, either for a grieving process. It could not only be death, as you showed us, the mother with the 8-year-old daughter, but perhaps it was a separation between two people, a divorce, for example. And one party hasn't moved on, one party is struggling, depending on the context. And here I start to think about some of the social implications there, some of the psychological and mental health issues that might happen. Often people have memorialized texts between two people, even when a relationship has broken down, or they've memorialized images, and I use the term memorialize here very loosely, but obviously they're not going to connect again. But there is this longing to return to something that they once had great joy in. And I hope that either it comes to that again, or in an admonition it won't come, so I might still enjoy it in the framing that it was in when it was good.
Yeah.
What happens with other people's images in the digital world when we look at it like this? For example, my own image, when I exist in the metaverse, for example, or you exist in the metaverse, and then we're using these perhaps voice and other kinds of 3D images to revisit an experience we had as close as it could have been remade, for instance.
I hear you. Now, from a personal point of view, this time I was visiting my parents in summer. I just actually came back from there. And one of the things I wanted to create, and I created to some extent, is this digital archive of them spending time with my son, their conversations, their voices, and some of the plan for me is to actually have them talk about some things, of course, knowing that eventually that will be archived, and there are services for that. The thing that I missed out on the presentation, it's actually a $1 billion industry in terms of this afterlife stuff, the services. Some of them are just some glorified password keepers, and some are actually looking into it more from a humane perspective. It's because it's everybody is looking for some standards and ideas. So what I would say there is a huge demand for this, and we are creating it with intentionally or unintentionally, this archiving of ours. And I think that's a good thing for us to have a look into. But the problem I have twofold in the metaverse or some of the things is, first of all, imagine the person's it happened with some of the social networks before, when I think one or two social network arbitrarily changed their privacy status. And then some of the things which have been hidden, imagine a sexual orientation or relationship status or something, it became public. So the people who were deceased, they didn't have anything to say about it. And then there had been huge implications. There are cases like that. So what really intrigues me, I would not say bothers me, but it definitely is an intriguing thing, is what happens that the implications of these digital artifacts that we are creating in this metaverse or whatever verse that we are going to look into and have implications on, and more we are going to use it beyond just monetizations. What would be the social implications part of it? So I would say one of the things that within the realm of technology policy that we need to look into, of course, policies always and rules and regulations always playing a catch up with technology innovations, but there should be something in place where there can be some sort of a control, or at least some sort of a real-time consensus building with people in interest, not just the people who are in the position of power, so that we can have some sort of an idea. I'm not sure whether I'm making sense, but I'll tell you one thing, which is like, in many cases, I will go back to the examples that I used as digitizations of the marginalized communities. I think it's very important for us, because we have this opportunity when we are doing this, also tell them that, look, your data is important. Your digital presence is important, not just because you are living, but also after you are done. And it has value. So I think at least to some extent, we have a lot of opportunity to do that and see how it evolves or evolves. I'm not sure whether that answers your questions, but that's something that I just wanted to share.
It does answer my questions. And I just wanted to note to the people viewing the presentation and the Q&A that you had begun this search for questions and answers long before COVID came about. Could you tell us what COVID did to your research and also to this space that you're referring to?
So thank you for asking this, because there are different levels of this. I started, as you know, I have this huge bias on equity, inclusion, and justice when it comes to technology innovation. So that has been there. And this kind of conversation got a lot of press right before our global shutdown in different parts, especially in SSIS and whatnot. But COVID actually made it, again, as a researcher, it was a buffet of problems from a socio-religious, technological innovation point of view. Because we keep hearing things, say, from China, from India, from Sweden, from other places, of how people started looking into things. One is the absence of benchmarking, absence of regulations, absence of inclusions of participation. Those things were there. In addition, what happened is like reinterpretations of religious ideas and thoughts, then mourning, or managing our mourning and afterlife. Because I started with this, right? Because human society has been fascinated with afterlife forever. And in COVID, what we have seen, that kind of merged with our so many daily practices. So our digital footprint in COVID, it kind of forced us to increase manifold. It multiplied, and hence the risk and opportunities also multiplied, that is something. So in the last 2 years, we also unfortunately saw a lot of people deceased and their unattended digital accounts. And we have also seen real time, because we have been, so whatever researchers I have, we have been looking into how people are mourning, how people are managing those unattended or deceased users' accounts. And it has been fascinating. Region-wise, it differs. Perception of privacy, perception of self, perception of, collective usage. That kind of had huge impact on how those things have been modified. I have friends and families who are deceased and their accounts are still active, not being notified to memorialize. So, we have been interviewing people for that. In addition, what we are also doing is reaching out again to the religious scholars, in addition to the technological technical gurus, to look into how are their interpretations and what, and it's an ongoing process.
I think that will be a burgeoning space, and some religious organizations will opt for the metaverse, and some won't, for whatever reason. Increasingly, we might see digital heavens sprout up, not linked to any kind of religious affiliation, for example, but we have noted multiple times during these pre-record presentations this area that needs more investigation. Not much is known about the adoption of technology by religious organizations. Not much is known about how some organizations have transitioned their churches or their synagogues or their mosques with any technology. And I don't mean to make any assumptions that any tech has actually entered a mosque beyond perhaps a microphone, or a synagogue for that matter, or a church. But we are seeing very different setups. Long ago, people would have been shocked to see an electronic screen at a religious location, and now they're sprouting up everywhere for usability reasons and access to language or other things. Same with music or religious song, and the list goes on and on. Do you think metaverses will have different rooms with different organizations, and different possible services?
As a social scientist, I look into this as a fascinating place for evolution. And it's time to evaluate also and analyze how to do things. Whatever the initial conversations I had with the rabbis and the imams and the fathers, the chaplains, some of them were asking, so what happens? Do you can do bad deeds in a metaverse or a virtual reality, or it doesn't count? We don't know. Well, so one of our sheikhs, he was funny. He was asking, so what happens when that sheikh is an avid gamer. So he's like, what happens when I don't pray while I'm playing in a metaverse or like in a virtual reality? Does that count? I was like, I have no idea. So those things are there, right? But in addition to this, what happens is, so these are the funny parts, but also is how are you interpreting, because these social norms and socio-cultural norms, which has been there for hundreds of thousands of years in different shapes and sizes, and how are you rebranding itself? I will actually even push it further, Katina. I would say these kind of metaverses are definitely give us the scope for new religion and new religions, and not just reinterpreting the old ones. And that's awesome. As I think as researchers, that gives us the opportunity to look beyond. But as we know, that technology itself does not do much. It kind of reflects whatever bads or the goods we have. Unfortunately, in many cases, it does not just reflects. For negativity, it can also multiplies or amplifies. So those things are also there. So but in last 2 years, we have seen so many technological adaptations. I'm an optimist, and I look into it and imagine in the global pandemic, people were in need of in whatever shapes and sizes, spiritual guidances and hopes and whatnot, whatever ways. And I think our digital presence and ideas and thoughts helped a lot.
I think also when I look at some of the sacraments that couldn't be performed, for example, in person, like the sacrament of confession in the Catholic Church, many were able to do this online or through some other mechanism that wouldn't have been available to them previously. It is interesting when you do listen to philosophers who also say, well, isn't it interesting that in their eyes, religion, for example, is a human innovation. It's a gamification of sorts. You know, we create a space where we feel better, we get some uplift and some aim, and we walk away and feel healthier potentially and better as a human being for being here and what we're contributing as an individual. The metaverse will probably escalate that many times over if we have that perception that it's all a game anyway, and the metaverse is just another extension of an existing game called religion. And this is, you know, the debate that is starting to come to the fore. But I think it's a discussion that needs to be had, because when we look at numbers, yes, there are increasing numbers of people, developing what we call faith in any of the monotheistic and non-monotheistic faiths and religions. But it's going to be interesting to see what comes of it. Now, I want to, in my second last question to you, ask you about the influence and the impact of machine learning, of deep learning, in particular of image systems and image detection, and putting on an Oculus or putting on some other form of a space, which I can't call physical, but you are embodied still with a headset on your head, but you are let free. What is that doing to this question of digital afterlife? Machine learning, with voice, with images, with the recreation of events. Is it going to be difficult for us to know what is real and what is not, what is current and what is real? I mean, perhaps that's the wrong term, but I think you get my question.
We don't know. I'll ask you. I'll actually start with easy one. Is like, imagine the pilgrimage. In many cases, the pilgrimages are tough. It's kind of tough in terms of physically, monetarily, and whatnot, in many religions. So definitely these kind of VR options have been talked about. Some of them are also already available. Some of them are introducing it to make it more, what I should say, inclusive but not democratized. It's more like at least you have the option to go touch and feel and have a stab at it. But the interesting part is that you were talking about how we are changing and reinterpreting things. But while I'm doing this, do I get the points of what if I was there in person? Imagine that you were talking about confession, right? So what is allowed and what is not allowed? But who defines what is allowed and not allowed? Who is to say the stakes? So I think these are fascinating conversations to have. So these are the more applied ones. But at the same time, the things that really, I think we won't be able to control. But I think as people, as thinkers, as philosophers, it's our place to raise the questions and have the conversations in both ways, to look into these right now as uncharted territories, that what happens to the crimes and the goodnesses that we see in the virtual world. And what kind of impacts. As I said before, that it kind of just reflects and multiplies whatever we are doing here in the real world. It's never going to replace this. Like, imagine this. What is virtual reality? I work with refugees. I work in different remote parts of the world where connectivity is not a right. It's actually a luxury, and it's being exploited. So I think, these kind of things, but at the same time, Am I saying that we first need to address these and then this? No. The thing is, those people are also going to have this kind of exposure, who are marginalized to these kind of things. So how can we solve this? At least include the people's challenges in this kind of conversations as we are innovating this. I keep saying this, that innovation should not be confined in these, climate-controlled labs in global north. And I think when we ensure some of the solutions will just come. We don't have to worry about this.
Faheem Hussain, I think you have bamboozled us today with these many thoughts and many directions and many reflections. We've asked one last question to all of our presenters and interviewees, and that question is as follows. If you had one message for Silicon Valley, what would it be?
Hire me as a consultant. Or give me money to have PhD students so that I can do more research on this. No, but jokes apart, I would say that it would be wonderful to see real inclusion in the innovation process. If we envision, no matter what happens, we have created new worlds and new ideas and new boundaries. We have created those things. As we are populating it, we should be very careful and we should be inclusive. If we don't do this, the responsibility is actually on us.
Well, if you feel as spoiled as we do, you've just heard a talk by Clinical Associate Professor Faheem Hussain from the School for the Future of Innovation in Society at Arizona State University. This is our symposium, an international one, on digital privacy and social media. And today we've been speaking with Faheem on the digital afterlife. If you're interested to plug in virtually or attend in person at San Jose at the Marriott on the 1st of August, please register at this address. If you're interested in joining any myriad of the societies that have been responsible for this symposium, please go ahead and look out for the IEEE Consumer Technology Society, IEEE Digital Privacy Initiative, the IEEE Society on the Social Implications of Technology, among which also extended reality section in the IEEE Future Directions Committee. Dr. Robert Abbas and myself have enjoyed listening to Faheem, and I would concur with Faheem. If there are any major players out there or lesser in size, do hire him as a consultant, because he would bring great wisdom to you, and do please support his research because his PhD students are phenomenal, as are his collaborators. We've sure enjoyed this episode and we hope to be with you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.